It was actually at the very beginning when the partnership agreement first came into being. And that year we had many meetings with the strategic plan advisor at the time. She'd just been named, and the principals were coming in to work with her on developing the partnership agreement. And from that we were told that we had to, for each one of the goals, we had to develop our own objectives and our own mesas. I remember it being a very confusing, stressful time because most principals didn't understand what was expected of them. The board too was trying to figure it out and not quite sure how to go about this. So there was a lot of uncertainty, and we certainly didn't know how to deal with data. Like, we didn't know how to bring data into our planning, into our strategic plans for our schools, or educational projects. We didn't know how it all fit together. And so that was the beginning. At the time, one of our consultants, Jeff Hipp, was beginning an evidence-based project. He was one of the trainers who was getting trained with Geneviève Leggetti. And he brought the information to our team at Educational Services. He trained us. We all read DataWise, and we became a little more DataWise. And from there, he organized a session to train each principal to come in with a team of teachers to receive training on the data team process.
Well, being trained on the data team process and bringing it back to my board, at that point, I was a language arts consultant. So my clientele, if you will, were teachers. So as we were bringing evidence-based practice, part of we're bringing that into our culture here at Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, it gave me a great opportunity to actually just work. First thing I did was I got on the phone and I called some of the principals that I had done work in their school already, and I felt that their staff was ready, so we actually set up data teams. And so it was actually putting it to work right away. Always with the explanation that there are many ways to go about this, but we're starting with this recipe, if you will. We're starting with this process, and the suggestion, get your feet wet with this process, and then we'll see about how things need to be changed and adapted for each school, and much of our system. So being as part of the lead data team, that was my role to bring to our staff. One of the things we did was we did a book study on the data team process. So we did that as every meeting we had somebody review a different chapter. We talked about how we would implement it. So we basically got the consultants on board as well. And so after that initial training with the entire, or at least a school team from each of our schools, we let them know that our consultants are very familiar with this process, and they need to take the first step to come to us to say, we would like to try it. And of course, we solicited people as well. We solicited schools, certain subjects where we knew that they were, they needed some work. We basically went to all levels: principals, teachers, consultants, and even our directors understood the process.
So our consultants had all bought into this process. They all were on board with it. They were all trying to promote it in the schools. We had pockets of teachers interested. Where we made the most progress is in the schools where the principals were supporting the data team process. That's where progress happened. Where the principals were involved to the extent that they were learners alongside the teachers. In those elementary schools is where we saw the biggest gain, of course, because that's where the consultants spent the most time and had the most impact on training the teachers. But we realized that we couldn't do that for all of our schools because it was just far too time consuming, and we couldn't always be there. So working with the principals was key.
You know, there's a different response to looking at data from elementary school to high school. In the elementary level, they're already the structure is set up in that there's more collaboration and more of understanding of teaching the whole child, because you really are at that level. You're not just teaching a subject. You really are teaching the whole child. So it was already almost predisposed to having meetings and having an understanding, and they may have been a little less interested in the data itself, again because they see their students more frequently, so they intuitively know how they're doing. It was surprising when we did finally put the data, and they would look at graphs and they would look at charts, that they were surprised, and so I think they saw the value. But they were more interested in jumping to the instructional strategies and having that conversation. So there's more willingness to do that.
We worked a little differently at the secondary level. We did the same thing with the reports. We gave them the reports on each of their subject areas. And then because we saw that we weren't making very much progress with PLCs in the secondary level, it's very hard in our big high schools particularly to get that going. We had all of the consultants at the beginning of the school year meet with the groups of teachers and show them their results and bring them through a data team process. And then we offered support and tried to encourage them to continue meeting. But next year, what we're planning to do is we're asking each principal to identify one subject area where the teachers would like to meet, and the consultants will follow up and continue those PLCs in the schools.
In terms of tools that we've developed to help schools become more autonomous in terms of looking at their own evidence, we have developed our dropout prevention dashboard, which our high schools look at. At the elementary level, we provide graphs that are explain the end of year results. The principals can just go in and click a button on their school, and they can actually generate these at the end of the year. We've also provided some graphs, some data entry for their DRA results, so reading results, so that the schools again can monitor. We don't monitor that at the board level, but that's something that they can do at the school level. Those are really the only tools that we've developed, other than paper-based tools in terms of helping them organize the data team process and things like that. Those are the only digital tools that we've been working on. I think one of the benefits is if we could get everybody to understand that everybody who works in the school, that every student is their responsibility, whether they teach them or not. I think that's been one of the benefits in our schools that have really adopted it. They've come together. Secondly, I think it saves time. I think we don't embark on projects that are, I don't want to say useless, but projects that are misdirected, and where finances and human resources are put towards something that is really not the problem, but let's really look at the problem. And I think the other thing is teachers talking to teachers, I think, is the best professional development. So if we can facilitate teachers actually just sitting together and keeping focused on the fact that student success is the primary reason they're there, and they have all the answers. They most likely have all the answers. So I think those are probably the biggest benefits.
We have in one school this year seen a huge gain, because in this school they decided to really focus on one objective. So as time has gone on, we've gone from our original, which was every school had to work on all 5 of the ministry objectives and determine their own objective within that, and create data teams for all of those. That was ridiculous. It didn't work. It was just far too diluted. So what we've ended up with now is, what is the one thing, or what are the 2 things that you really need to work on this year? Let's look at that, and how do we do that? And in the schools where they've really stuck to that, targeting one area, we've started to see great progress. And in this one school I'm thinking about in math, their improvement has gone from a 35 to 40% success rate in the common assessments to over 80% success rate in all grade levels. I think the biggest improvement that we've seen overall in the whole system is the change of culture, is that teachers are now talking about evidence. They understand that they've got to go from data and that they've got to identify the weak areas and then target in order to see results. Start with the teachers that want to go from good to great. Get a team in place that is willing to go the distance with you. And make those teams the examples. Start there. Start small but think big. Not start big and then have to go to small. And I would say interest the teachers in what matters to them. Ask questions and make sure that you're listening. Because if you're going to go in with the magic pill, no one's going to take the magic pill. At first we went in with a very elaborate PowerPoint and all kinds of research-based information to give them and beautiful package, and we left that one school and felt that we had not succeeded in getting the team on board. And the next school, I said, let's not bring anything. Let's just go with a piece of paper and a pencil. And let's talk to them and see what they're already doing, what they'd like to be doing, and then maybe offer some help. And let's see how that goes. And believe it or not, that went a lot better. Get a lot of information before you start giving information is what I would say is very important. And that probably should happen before you show them any evidence of anything.
I have to say, over the years, the vocabulary has changed. Schools, principals, they do know what evidence is. They do understand this process. They've participated in it, and so we're certainly moving ahead at an educational snail's pace, but we are moving ahead.